Once again, we're back here with Todd Wilson, and I want to ask you a little bit about your church.
Yes.
And how long have you been there?
Into my 7th year.
End of the 7th year. And so you've come in, and one of the things I know you guys have had to kind of work through is how you're going to do cultural engagement. Yes. And this is a thing, and many of you maybe watching don't know, but it's a very debated thing.
Yes.
It's so different models. Without going into that, we'll have stuff on our website about different models of cultural engagement. Yes. But without getting into the models, kind of how have you guys just practically worked this out?
Yes. Well, I think one of the first things that I had to come to terms with when I came to Calvary was the fact that the church has an embedded or an implicit model for cultural engagement. Mm-hmm. They're doing cultural engagement. I might be, when I came, I thought we might be able to do it a little differently. But the first thing was to identify how the church has been doing cultural mm-hmm. engagement and thinking about cultural engagement. A lot of it has to do with self-identity, self-understanding, approach to the context that we find ourselves in. The church's basic model for cultural engagement was, and here I'm drawing on the work of James Davison Hunter, who's been really helpful mm-hmm. in my thinking on this, and I'll try to
how to change the world.
Yeah, how to change the world. That's right. He lays out sort of 4 different paradigms for cultural engagement, and I found that super helpful for our congregation. Our congregation was basically, I think you'd say, a defensive, what Hunter calls a defensive against mm-hmm. approach to cultural engagement. Mm-hmm. Where the priority is on if there's a grace-truth spectrum, right, or balance, it would be on the truth end of that balance. Mm-hmm. Seeing and I should say that the church is in a very progressive, liberal context. Oak Park, Illinois, our 2 patron saints are Ernest Hemingway and Frank Lloyd Wright. Mm-hmm. Born and reared in Oak Park, so gives you a feel for, it's probably the closest place to Manhattan in the Midwest. Yeah. And so that's the context that we're serving in.
So when you say truth-based,
yes.
give us maybe a caricature of that.
Yes.
So right. Just so they can know what you mean by that. Because truth-based sounds
right.
pretty good.
No, that's right. That's right.
We both want to say, truth is good. So,
absolutely.
So maybe give a,
So one of the ways we talk about models for cultural engagement and try to help our church understand is that we need to be like Jesus to the community, mm-hmm. to the culture. Jesus was full of grace and truth. Mm-hmm. And so there was a balance in the way he thought about and lived out the truth of who God is, the truth about where the culture is, mm-hmm. and grace and mercy and relationship. And so we've tried to just calibrate that a little bit better in a little more balanced fashion.
He dealt with Pharisees a little bit differently than he did
absolutely
the social outcasts.
Absolutely.
And so, and we see that relationally.
Absolutely. And an important thing for us, when I say we leaned on the truth end of things, our church often talked about itself as a lighthouse in the community. Now that's a pretty interesting metaphor for mm-hmm. cultural engagement. That is to say, you're inside this building and you've got this big light and you're shining it into the dark, pagan, secular culture around you. Yeah. That doesn't say anything about integrating into the culture as servants of the community mm-hmm. and connecting with people relationally where they're at. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I've tried to help the church do is shift from the lighthouse mentality to a salt and light mm-hmm. mentality. That you are well integrated into the life of the community. You actually know and care about your neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Despite the fact that they may be living in ways that you think are completely crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you're probably living in ways that they think are crazy. Mm-hmm. But to make relational contact and connection and live as Jesus did in a very incarnational way. Mm-hmm. So that's been really key for us. Yeah,
that's helpful. One of the things that there seems to be kind of emerging consensus on is that you have kind of different models.
Yes.
And that there's times where, and the reason that that people argue over this is because biblically you see all of those models have some biblical warrant.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so you have biblical warrant for each of those, and yet some of it's about maybe what season you are in the particular culture, what culture you're in.
That's right.
And so what's kind of coming together is people recognizing that and having more of these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, you mentioned to change the world as one kind of example, but there's other people coming from different perspectives, yet they're seeing the value of other people's models. And one of the things we're trying to do at the center is say, okay, you can come at this thing from various different models,
Yes.
and
Yes.
some of it's just like what your discipline is, where you're
Yep.
actually located. Yet when we do come together, as long as you're not in the extreme, like just
Yes.
social gospel, we don't
Yes.
really care about the gospel as we have in 1 Corinthians 15, but we just want to help people.
Yes.
Well, that's kind of not what we want at the center, and so that's kind of outside the bounds. But if you're coming and saying we want to do social justice, well then and we're attaching it to the gospel.
Indeed.
And so it's more of saying there's certain extremes with every view, but how can we work together at an institution where we want to kind of bring some different thoughts on this together?
No, absolutely.
But one of the how has this like what are some things you guys have practically done within your church
Great
to
question.
actually kind of do this for the pastors listening?
Yeah. Maybe the most practical thing we've done is cast the vision for this, honestly. And the tagline we've used is, we are in a church that is in Oak Park for Oak Park. That we are not a church that has a post office box in Oak Park, but we're for something else, we're some other community. Helping our people take responsibility for and integrate into, in an incarnational way, the community. One of the things we metaphors we've used to try to help our folks, or examples, is we have two bookstores in Oak Park. Well, we used to have two. We only have one now, but two. We have Borders down the street, and we also have the Book Table. Borders, of course, nationally known franchise, this whole thing with a space. And we have the Book Table, which is a locally owned and operated bookstore. And we've said to our church, we need to be more like the Book Table and less like Borders. Or we've got the Buzz Cafe, a locally owned and operated coffee house, and Starbucks. We say we need to be more like the Buzz Cafe, where we are really integrated into the community, and insofar as we can affirm and share in the values and the concerns of the community, we need to be doing that. We need to be doing that. Yes, pointing those, taking those values and drawing, as you put it, the line to the gospel, and showing how the gospel is the fulfillment of those aspirations in our culture. But really, there are things that we can affirm within our community. Some of the values for justice, values for inclusion, and things like this, that are gospel commitments, need to be refracted through the light of the gospel, but are ways we can share in and contribute to the community.
Very good, very good.